Hello everyone and welcome to the SBK Betting Podcast, the Jumps preview, the one you've all been waiting for. It will be your go-to guide to the National Hunt season. And what makes this podcast even better is that we're going to do our best to keep it to under an hour to ensure you know exactly what is coming. And we're going with a tried and tested format, so you have something for every division. And on top of that, we have got Ross Millar and Tom Collins. And pleasingly, we'll be able to remind you both, Tom and Ross, of the good things we unearthed this time last year, because there were some satisfying moments last season. And if you have been listening to this podcast, you would have enjoyed themselves too. But if you're a new listener, this is your go-to, as I said, to the 2023-2024 jump season. We also, one rule to make this a little bit different to the normal previews you've probably listened to, is that we do not want horses that won at the Cheltenham Festival this year. So we've made Ross and TC work hard. They've had to think outside the box and they've had to come up with something that essentially you haven't heard before, because these can get repetitive, but we promise you one thing, that we are not going to be like everyone else. So without further ado, we're going to begin with the novice hurdlers to follow, and I found it difficult to decide who I'm going to start with, but maybe only just TC gets in front because he gave his selections a whole day before Ross. He's been chomping at the proverbial bits to get going, and maybe a bit like what we did with Ross this season on the flat, we're going to convert our resident flat man into a proper jumps man. So what have you got for us from the novice hurdle division?
Yeah, well, I spent all of Sunday, we are recording this on Tuesday evening, I spent all of Sunday prepping for this because I've been thick and involved in the flat season for the last 6 months, whether that be UK or US. So basically, I've forgotten every single jump source on the planet except for the obvious. And as you say, the rule is not to mention the obvious. So a lot of work went in, but that's why the selections got in early doors. 2 novice hurdlers to follow this season. I had to go through a few stable tours. I looked through some point-to-point form and some bumper form. These 2 were the 2 that stood out for me. Now, before I mentioned the first horse, I actually went in and watched a replay of this horse, but with the mindset of watching it for the winner, which was a horse called Predator's Gold. Now, I was hoping that I was going to be really taken by his performance, trained by Willie Mullins, and that I was going to put him up as my novice hurdler to follow. Having watched the replay, he wasn't even the one that really caught my eye. So I had to, go off course a little bit. I decided not to put up Predator's Gold, but put up the horse who finished 4th, which is called Farland. Now, this horse has subsequently moved to Paul Nicholls as well, which makes him even more interesting. He was very green in the race, super keen as well, but he stayed on powerfully in the closing stages. And it was crucial, in my eye, that he was sent off favourite for a trainer that's not very well known for winners under rules. So they quite clearly knew he had plenty of talent. He finished the race off well. He was only beaten around 2 lengths by a horse in Predator's Gold, who, as I say, has a nice profile. So I think the form is going to stack up. Now, I did read subsequently a stable tour from Paul Nicholls, and he said that Farland won't be out until around Christmas time. So you have got a month or 2 to wait before we see him under rules. But I think he's got a copious amount of potential, and he's definitely one to follow for the new year. The second horse is Jericho de Repine. Now, unfortunately for me and for you guys, if you are following these selections, he's already high up in the betting for the Supreme Novices Hurdle. I think he's around 18 to 1 at the moment, maybe 6th or 7th favourite. But in my opinion, based on his point win, he could easily be Nicky Henderson's best novice hurdler this term. This horse beat a runner called the Other Mozzie by 11 lengths in his point. The Other Mozzie subsequently come out and finished second on bumper debut for Gavin Cromwell. And I think that was a pretty good race as well. Nicky Henderson's already stated his love for this horse. He's got a nice jumps pedigree. And he just looks like the type of horse that Henderson does exceptionally well with. We haven't seen him so far, and I don't think he's got any entries at this stage. But Jericho de Repine is another horse to follow, as well as Farland.
Okay, thank you. So 2, interestingly, novice hurdlers from TC from based in the UK. So we've got champion trainer Paul Nicholls and Nicky Henderson, who, we know what he can do when he unearths some younger horses. But Ross knows, and we all know very well, that there is one country that absolutely excels in this division. So I'd be surprised if you haven't got something from across the sea. And I say, in general, Ross, is this a division that you get really excited about, that really gets your gears going, and the novice hurdlers, the ones that you really look forward to seeing, a bit like you do with the juveniles, the 2-year-olds in the flat season?
Yeah, I like the novice hurdlers, and I really like the novice chasers, but I thought there was a good crop of bumper horses last year coming into novice hurdlers this year. So I got it down to just a short list of 4, I'm afraid. But it did say horses on the brief, not just horse. So again, 2 from the UK, 2 from Ireland. Paul Nicholls certainly has one for me. I was at Aintree on the day of the graded bumper. I thought Centaura was just mad keen through that race. I was actually surprised he lasted as long as he did. Then got hampered turning in. And Harry Cobham's got many great qualities, but his ability to look after a horse when it's beaten is sort of up there for me. Pulled him up, saved him for another day. His Taunton win before Aintree was really impressive. I think he's a free-going horse, bags the pace. So Centaura might not be one for the spring festivals, but I think he'll win plenty of races in the meantime. Favour and fortune for Alan King. I actually quietly fancied him. Well, not so quietly. I told you guys about it on the podcast for the champion bumper. He'd been wicked impressive in 2 bumper wins before the champion bumper, and he sort of fell apart in the champion bumper itself. Maybe it was a slightly softer ground. His best form had come on good ground, or whether it was just the occasion. And Alan King wasn't in great form at that time of the year. He's come out and absolutely bolted up at Hereford on his hurdle debut. The form is perhaps not worth all that much, but he absolutely slammed them. Unusually for a Trevor Hemmings coloured horse, he's got bags and bags of pace. We tend to think of them as stayers, but this looks like a really quick horse. So again, might sort of be found wanting when it comes to the festivals, but in the short term, I think Favour and Fortune will win plenty of novice hurdles. Then 2 from Ireland and 2 for Willie Mullins. It's for me. Really disappointed me in the bumper. I thought he was going to win that and just didn't. And then slightly went apart in Punchestown as well, but he was far too keen on both occasions. I think you can forgive that. Maybe with a hurdle in front of him, he'll shape much better. And I think he's got untold potential. And then one that's perhaps just got forgotten a little bit because of recency bias. Redemption Day was really, really good as a bumper horse back in 2022. He actually beat Music Drive, who's now rated 127, and he got within half a length of Facile Vega at the Punchestown Festival. He had missed the last season because of injury. He's back now, and I think he'll take all the beating in plenty of novice hurdles in Ireland this season.
Okay, so 2 from Ireland and 2 from a UK perspective for Ross. So just repeat that: Centaura, Favour and Fortune, It's For Me, and Redemption Day. And I suppose it is a division that is wealthy in terms of options, and trying to find the ones that might just go slightly under the radar can be difficult. Farland and Jericho de Repene for TC. I've got a couple to add as well, and again, obviously it's must be an exciting time for the Hemmings family, because I'm going to add another one in their colours. Bowen's Park is a horse that I was really taken by when he ran a very eye-catching race in the Aintree bumper. He was very, very keen, but he began his new season over hurdles in brilliant fashion. He backed off the boards. He runs for Henry Daly, who it would say probably it's early enough for Henry Daly, novice hurdler, to come out. He's going to be a better chaser, definitely, but I'll be interesting to follow him. And in the name of this game of this is horses to follow, not necessarily horses to win at Cheltenham, but these are horses to follow to see how they progress and strengthen up. And I'm hoping that Bowen's Park will do so. A horse that might be a little bit more obvious will be Brighter Days Ahead for me, for a mare for the Gordon Elliot team in the Gigginstown colours. She's a horse that's very well bred. She's already done plenty this season. She's won twice, including a graded race, and they obviously think a lot of her, but she's clearly very forward too. It's going to be an interesting division, that mare's novice division, as Willie Mullins always gets his horses out a bit later, but she's one that just looks so streetwise for her age, and I'm hopeful that she'll continue on progressing, which she already has done this season. So a good selection of novice hurdlers to follow this season, and we'll move on quickly now from the novice hurdlers to the novice chasers to follow. And actually, if you look back at I suppose Cheltenham is a good yardstick to how well our novice chasers did compared to the Irish. We had the Real Whacker, Stage Star, didn't do too badly, and I think the Irish novice chasers are always seen to be the ones that always take the beating in this respect. So we're interesting to find out what Ross and TC have got. Ross, maybe I'll start back with you, and maybe in the same vein, how did you how did you view or review the top level novice hurdlers coming into this division, or even the horses that are switching from a couple of years over hurdles and are now beginning life over fences?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we've had a couple stay hurdling that I thought might have gone chasing. And we've obviously got the couple from the Supreme are now coming chasing. I think that's too hard to split them. Facile Vega should make up into a better chaser, but I think the Arkle's a muddy picture, so I've steered away from that. A horse that I did like last season and perhaps failed to go on from what he achieved in early season races was Blood Destiny. I thought he looked like a really smart prospect in juvenile hurdles. He's not a flat rat in that he's by good no risk at all. So he's got a jumping pedigree, big sized horse. Just went apart in the Triumph Hurdle at Cheltenham. It was a sort of inexplicably bad run, and then didn't really fare an awful lot better at Punchestown when beaten at odds on. But I think it's interesting they go straight over fences with him as a 4-year-old. Certainly got the scope for fences, and on the back of that early season form, he's certainly above average. I think he'll stay well. He might be 1 for 2 mile form, might even make up into a Turner's horse later in the season. But I'm certain that he'll get back on track now over fences, and I expect to see plenty of him. And then a horse that I gave a mention for the Albert Bartlett at a big old price last year, and he ran really disappointingly. And I was actually quite heartened to read that the yard had quietly fancied him as well. It's Chianti Classico for Kim Bailey. He made his chase debut at Chepstow back last month. I'm always slightly cautious of this. Got the scope to make a better chaser, the frame to make a better chaser. For me, jumping is an awful lot more about than just brute force strength. And he did run on down to the first fence and slightly ran into the bottom of it. And I did wonder what he was going to make of the rest of the round. But he learnt plenty from that mistake at the first fence and jumped from fence to fence. David Bass was absolutely electric on him up the home straight. He rode him like he was a seasoned handicap chaser, throwing him at fences. And every time he asked, Chianti Classico came for him. And he ran out a very wide margin winner at Chepstow. The third there, Inch House, has run out an impressive winner at Newbury himself since then. Chianti Classico beat him hollow. I think he's got plenty more scope left in him yet. He's apparently going to be out at Ascot next week. I think he could make up into a really smart novice chaser. He's got unlimited stamina, so you could look at perhaps the National Hunt Chase, or they might just try and mind him and sneak him into the Ultima. Either way, I think he's a really smart prospect, and from a yard that perhaps goes a bit under the radar.
What did you make of his first start?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I mean, like I said, I was a bit concerned when he ran on down to the first because he sort of got into the bottom of it and didn't make a great shape. But from there on in, he popped away nicely. And then when David Bass really asked him up the straight, he was pretty. I mean, David Bass is a really nice jockey to watch when it's going well, but he doesn't sort of leave anything in the locker. He puts it all out there, and he certainly asked him for some pretty adventurous strides up the home straight, but clearly had every faith in the horse that he was going to come from, and he duly did.
Okay. So Blood Destiny and Chianti Classico for Ross, novice chasers to follow. And I suppose that question that I asked Ross, and I know I'm going to ask you this, TC, because I know what horse you've got, the kind of classic novice hurdler into novice chase division, or the classic, been doing it round the block over hurdles for a few time type of horse. That's what we expect to see. But I know with your horse, it's slightly different, slightly unusual route to novice chasing division, and you can tell us why you think that this is obviously a good move from the camp that is responsible for your selection.
Yeah, so the horse in question is Fact to File, who hasn't actually run over hurdles. Was last seen running in the Champion Bumper, finishing second to A Dream to Share. And I've heard, and people have told me, that Willie Mullins is planning on sending him straight novice chasing and completely ignoring hurdles, which I think is an interesting move. The whole point of this podcast was to be slightly outside the box, and you'll notice from some of the horses I'm going to mention, especially later on, that I'm going way outside the box in some of these spheres. This one's just a horse that maybe people wouldn't expect to go chasing, haven't seen the news or anything like that, so I thought I'd bring him up in this section. I've also got an Ante-post bet. That is the final section of this podcast for the Brown Advisory, so I thought I'd pick a horse that would fit for the Turners, and Fact to File is just that. Now, he only lost twice in bumpers, both to A Dream to Share, finishing second both times. I think A Dream to Share is a very good horse. And the fact that Fact to File could get that close to him on each occasion means that he must be pretty talented in his own right. And also at Cheltenham, he was badly inconvenienced on the run-in. Look, he wouldn't have won the race. A Dream to Share was by far the best. And that's not just because I backed the horse, and I'm saying that through a bit of bias. But he was the most talented bumper horse last season, and he kind of proved that at all the big festivals, whereas Factor File was more of a stayer. And that 2 mile trip wouldn't have been ideal for him anyway. Saying that, being stopped, losing momentum at a crucial stage of a race for a horse who has extra stamina is never ideal. So you can mark up his performance. Willie said that because of his age, they want to go straight novice chasing with him. Again, I think that's a good move. And aside from Paul Nicholls, who I think is the best trainer to get these horses to jump in their first season chasing, Willie Mullins has to be second best, in my opinion. And he's going to make sure that Factor File is pinpoint accurate over these fences. He could easily make up into 2.5 miler, and the Turners looks the ideal spot for him. So, yeah, I'll take Factor File. I don't really love the novice hurdlers from last year anyway, and he was just the most intriguing.
I wonder if it's a case of, Willie Mullins has so many horses in the novice hurdle division that it might actually be sensible to split some of them up and give one a roll at the dice at novice chasing. And being owned by JP McManus, he's very happy just to get on with whatever his trainer suggests. It's not because he's necessarily the age is the reason, but it's also kind of, why not? Why can't you do that? But it's a funny one when you've seen a horse that's gone from a point to point, back to bumper, now over to fences again. But at least we know, and I suppose that point to point form shows that he essentially knows what he needs to do. He doesn't need to be novice hurdling.
No, exactly. You don't need to go novice hurdling. You don't need to go the tried and trusted route with every horse. It's like inbuilt in all these trainers that you have to go bumper, hurdle, chasing. Like, you just don't. Some trainers ignore the bumper side of things, which is perfectly fine. And some ignore the hurdling side of things, and obviously some ignore chasing as well. But with this horse, I think he's got so much potential that the fact they're willing to just chuck away the hurdling career, at least for this moment in time, must mean that they think he could develop very quickly into one of the best novice chasers. Well, that's what I'm hoping anyway.
Yeah, okay, so Factor File for TC, Ross, Blood Destiny, and Chianti Classico. I've got a couple. One that isn't exactly under the radar, but he didn't win at Cheltenham, so that counts. Hermes Allen, Grade 1 winner in his own right last year when winning the Challow, and looked like he had his world at his feet, and he was going to be the horse that was going to give Paul Nicholls a novice hurdle victory at the festival. He just couldn't live with the others, with the Irish horses, and also at Aintree as well. But I don't think that's any reflection on his talent and what he can do. I've been really taken by Paul Nichols's novice chases to date so far. We're recording this in the middle of November, and he's already had Stay Away Faye and Nappers Hill absolutely bolt up and showed to be very, very high class types. But Paul Nicholls wanted to make it very clear that Hermes Allen coming out could be the best of them all. So if they have set that bar pretty high, Hermes Allen, I'd imagine with the class that he probably has, over more superior to Stay Away Faye and Nappers Hill, we've got something to really look forward to. So he is my runner, my selection from a British perspective anyway. And then a horse that I really, really enjoyed following last year was In the Pocket for Henry de Bromhead, and I thought he ran in a completely the wrong race at the Cheltenham Festival, where he ran at fourth, I think it was, in the Supreme, and then he went to Aintree and he won the Grade 1 again over the same trip, that 2 mile and just half a furlong, but he stayed on really strongly, and I just really liked his attitude. I think he's the kind of horse that you want to see attacking fences and really using himself nicely. So he's a horse that I just really enjoyed following last year. So wherever he was going to go, whether it was staying over hurdles or going chasing, he's one that I hope can continue on a good, essentially a very high trajectory for Henry de Bromhead. So those are my two to add to the others to keep into your tracker. We'll then go into what must be the toughest section of them all, because there's one horse and one horse only that sort of is going to rule, which is slightly... I mean, I was, if anything, gut-wrenched to hear that Constitution Hill is staying over hurdles, because I just think that it just doesn't allow for much creativity in terms of what we think he could be. He could be anything, and he's just going to keep up a route that we've seen has been done before with some of our best hurdlers. But look, this argument can be rolled out for weeks and weeks if we wanted to, but we need something to give him to think about, and I hope that there will be trainers that will do so and are going to go into war with Constitution Hill thinking that they've got something that will make him think about things, or they will just go a route and avoid him. So whatever it might be, Ross, what did you unearth? What do you think could be a horse to give Constitution Hill something to think about? Or at least, are you one of those crazy characters who think that he could have a chink in his armour?
No, he's got no chink in his armour whatsoever, Jess. And I think if you're training a 2-mile hurdler, the best thing you can do is avoid him, which does make it a bit of a shame for us watching on. But sometimes you just have to marvel at one horse in particular, and he's spectacular to watch. And we're very fortunate to be around in his era, really. Two that I think will do well in 2-mile division as long as they do avoid him. Another Nicky Henderson trained horse, Under Control, owned by JP McManus. I know there's a thread here with TC selection as well, but she was really progressive in her 4 starts last season, apart from when running really badly at in the Mares Novice at the Cheltenham Festival. But she was massively weak in the market on that occasion, which told you that something wasn't right, or she wasn't fancied, or didn't have the conditions. But she then made hay on good ground, culminating with a win at Sandown, only winning by half a length from Iberico Lord. But I loved how she travelled into that race. She looks like a really pacey, strong travelling mare. And that was her 4th start in 6 weeks, which is a very unusual thing for Nicky Henderson to do. And I just wonder whether, having actually travelled into the race, those runs perhaps told, and she didn't find as much off the bridle. Either way, I think in a better race, her ability to travel so well, it'll stand her in good stead. And I think she's got plenty more to give yet. And then another one, and it is difficult for juveniles coming into what's known as a sort of the tricky second album, coming from juvenile into open company. But I really like what Beau Zenith did at Aintree. I know TC had been quite sweet on him, I think, for the Triumph, and he didn't go there. He went to Stratford and won an Egg and Spoon race instead, but won very impressively. Came to Aintree, travelled very powerfully through the race, and battled all the way to the line just to be beaten by a very smart filly, Willie Mullins, Zenta. I'd be really interested to see him on a stiffer track. I think he's a strong traveller, but I think he stays very well at this trip. Gary Moore's horses tend to improve their jumping with racing. Very rare do I see a novice hurdler or a novice chaser of Gary Moore's that I think, wow, that's a really smart, slick jumper. They tend to learn on the job a little bit. Beau Zenith might be open to plenty of improvement in that department. And if he is, he could shake up some of the 2-mile races if he who shall not be spoken of isn't there.
Okay, so yeah, we'll wonder whether they're going to keep. You can't imagine Nicky Henderson is going to throw that many horses in a same field against Constitution Hill. So you'd suppose that Under Control is going to stay away and avoid that, and maybe the mare's routes that she could find. But she is definitely a mare that I think, and there are a few Nicky Henderson horses that just underperformed at Cheltenham, bar the obvious. So I do think you could forgive her for that. I think she's was a really fascinating horse, that unusual for Nicky Henderson to get them going, get them out and about so quickly after their run. So they clearly wanted to unearth and see what she was made of. Ross mentioned that she ran in a race where she beat her stable companion Iberico Lord, and I know, TC, this is a horse that you were quite fond of, or definitely caught your eye at least.
Yeah, well, I am going very left field in this division. I just don't want to take on Constitution Hill at any point. So I decided to not even pick a horse that will take on Constitution Hill. It just seems like a division that's going to be dominated by him all year. But this isn't about just the Cheltenham races, as you touched on, all the big festivals. This is about horses to follow throughout the season who could return a healthy profit if you back them consistently. And the horse that I've come down on is Iberico Lord, who Ross mentioned finishing second to Under Control last season. Now, I am technically cheating because this horse probably isn't a 2-miler, but the one reason why I put him in this category is I think he'll win the Great Wood Hurdle. And if you're looking at Odds Checker and you see that sea of blue, that's because of me. No, I'm joking. Well, I mean, it might be. It might be because of me, but it probably isn't. I do think he wins that race, though. And, that's over 2 miles and half a furlong. So technically, he's categorised in this division. He looked super raw last year. He came into his own in the spring, winning a race before going to Sandown and finishing second. Finished off that event very strongly behind Under Control, and probably would have won in maybe another furlong, half a furlong. He was going 2 to that horse's 1 in the final 100 yards, that's for certain. He's going to be a real prospect over 2.5 later this season. As I say, the initial target's the Great Wood. I think a mark of 126 is very lenient. So Iberico Lord, for me, in the 2 mile 4 furlong hurdle category.
Okay, so if you're listening to this podcast beyond this weekend, which is 17th, 18th of November. Where's Aberica Lord going to go after the Greatwood?
I don't know. You know what, though? I do think he'll be very good in over 2.5. But the thing with him is he doesn't have that much natural pace throughout the race, but he finishes off his contest over 2 miles very strongly. So Nicky could easily come back to 2 miles or even stick to around 2 miles later in the season, because that fast early gallop in big field handicaps or whatever division, whatever class, he's running in at that point in the season will really suit him. So there is a chance that he will stick in this kind of sphere, but you never know.
Okay, well, he's rated 126 at the moment. Could develop into a kind of a Betfair hurdle horse, potentially, maybe, where you've got to stay up the hill at least. So we love that. We know that Nicky Henderson loves that race as well. So a lot of food for thought, and that's why you listen to this, because we want something for everything. It's all about the weeks in and around the big festival days as well. So Aberica Lord for TC, Ross for Bow Zenith, and Under Control, horses that all sort of link it within each other, but most likely to be missing out Constitution Hill. And yes, if you're a racing fan, you can just watch and enjoy that. Right, we'll move into the Stayers Hurdle division. Again, very open. Year on year, it's a right old puzzle, and I think that probably is the trickiest one in terms of going back year on year, how we've done here. I'll start with UTC. Is there a horse that you think, because we see the horses like this chip up every year, and it might be their year, it might not be their year, and they might still be sort of working out how to actually stay 3 miles. You know, we've seen the likes of Paisley Park just sort of come back and able to do it, but is there one that you think that's just sort of getting there, and this is their year to shine?
Not really. This is the only section I'm going to be downbeat on the whole podcast, so I do apologise for the next 30 seconds. But I have no love for this division whatsoever. I mean, bring back Big Bucks and Ingles Drever, because they were proper horses. Look, I don't think there's been a great horse since. No offence to Paisley Park and Connections or any others that have won in the staying hurdle division since the likes of Big Bucks, but it's been a slog. You know, for the horses and for the viewers, it hasn't been great. Look, I again found it very difficult to even bring up any horse in any positive light here as one to follow through the year. Obviously, there are some good stalwarts. I'd love to be involved with some of these horses, and you know, I wish them all the best. But as a follower of racing, I'm not going to be sticking any of these in my tracker. That is full stop. The one horse that I'm going to mention is Home by the Lee, just because I thought he was very good around Christmas time last season. He was unlucky at Cheltenham in the Stayers Hurdle, made a bad mistake on the first circuit just as they passed the winning line, and finished 5th, I think, in the race. Wasn't beaten too far. So he could be a horse that, you know, does well around Christmas time and then goes to the Stayers Hurdle about 10-1 and runs a place. But other than that, I have nothing really to mention here, Jess.
Okay, not much love for this division. No offence taken to all those 3 mile horses that are listening to this race, listening to this podcast. Yeah, the likes of Sire de Burley, you know, he got to hand it to the horse. Like, he just does it when he needs to. It's amazing, and massive prices as well. Is he a horse? Is that kind of horse a horse that you warm to, Ross, or you hoping to find something new and to really bring some life to this division?
No, we need something new and we need some life, don't we? Much as I love old Paisley Park, and I was very tempted just to put him in the WhatsApp group just to see your reaction. But it does need shaking up. I thought it was interesting reading some of the stable tours that Willie Mullins was flitting between what he was going to do with Sir Gerhard, and if he jumped badly, he might go back hurdling. He fell at the weekend, but he actually jumped far better than he had done previously, maybe a little bit low. They're quite taken by his handicap mark, I think, to try and go and perhaps win a big pot over fences. But it wouldn't be beyond the realms that he comes back to Stayers Hurdles just a year too late for TC. But I have got one, and it's from France, and it's Thelem, who is an absolute machine around Auteuil. Barely gets beaten in graded races over 3 miles, obviously on soft testing ground. But they've made noises that they'd like to come over for the Stayers. It's actually British owned. And straight away you think, it's going to get taken off its feet on spring ground. But actually it had the pace to place second over 1 mile 2 on the Fibre Stand as a 3-year-old. It's won and placed over 2 mile 2 at Auteuil. and is by Sidestep, who is a 6 furlong group winning Australian sprinter. So there is hope there that he might not be quite as ground dependent as we all think. And of course, plenty of young horses come across from France, having raced on soft ground at Auteuil and, mop up the Triumph Hurdle and the Supreme Novices and all those sort of races for Willie Mullins et al. So I don't think it's a given that he needs desperate ground. I think he'll perhaps come over once early in the year to get a bit of a sighter. And if that goes well, he might well be a lively springer for the stayers.
Okay, yeah, having a look at the owner's colours reminded me of Hurricane Fly colours, but they're not. But you say that they are English based?
Yes. I know the son is a friend of a friend of a friend is Stephen, I think. But that's all I can give you. And it's Stephen, not Stefan.
That sounds pretty English to me. Well, you look through his race record, Thelem, he's a 6-year-old, but wow, he's been on the go. 18 rules races, and he's won 10 out of 18. A majority, if not all of them, being at Auteuil. And we know that the French are happy to do that. Remind me quickly of who won who was the big shot that they had coming into the stayers this year. Who won the trial race? Gold Tweet. So and they were very keen and confident. I just didn't go right, but I don't think that's a horse that should be completely forgotten about. I think he didn't get the run. The race didn't pan out as he wanted it to. But I think that gave them the impetus. They enjoyed it so much. The French bringing the horses over that it might be we'll see a few more coming over the course of this season. Okay, so Home by the Lee and Thelem, one from France. We'll move on quickly to the 2-mile chasers to follow. Sad and disappointing about Energamine. We'll not be seeing him. Overall, Ross, I'll ask you first. What do you make of this division?
It's weak, isn't it? Particularly with Energamine gone. And of course, you can't mention Al Fabiolo because he was a winner at Cheltenham last year. But that said, watching it back and watching John Bond's back catalogue back, I'm just not sure he was anywhere near his best at Cheltenham in the Arkle. Aidan Coleman is battling back from a very bad knee injury, and if you follow me on Instagram, that the work he is going through is just incredible. And I wish him all the best, but I don't think he was at his best on him at Cheltenham, and I don't think he was at his best on him at Aintree when it was a bit of a gimme, and I think he sort of was almost in the mindset of just getting round and he'll win, and as a consequence he made some quite fiddly errors. But in the celebration chase at Sandown, which again pretty unusual for Nicky Henderson to go from Aintree to Sandown with a pretty smart novice into open company, he looked much better. Took a while to warm up to his jumping, but down the back he was really good. Stayed on very powerfully. The bare form beaten captain Guinness just about 4 lengths. He'll need to step up on that to get up into open grade. But I thought the way he jumped there and the way he stayed perhaps just opened their eyes to they could ride him a bit more aggressively. If Aidan Coleman doesn't get back, I'd be interested to see Nico de Bourneville on him. And I feel a bit guilty saying that because I think Aidan Coleman is fighting back for one horse and one horse only, and it is John Bon. Of course, Nicky Henderson and Jacob McManus aren't going to listen to me and give Nico the ride. But I think Nico is unparalleled when it comes to positioning a horse at a fence, particularly on 2-mile chasers. And I'd be really excited to see what he could do. So I've not given up yet that John Bon might yet shake Al Fabiolo up.
Yes, as it is the Can't Mention a Cheltenham Festival winner podcast, we can't use El Fabiolo, but John Bon, it's interesting. He's another one that maybe they might think about toying with going a little bit further as well. I don't know necessarily if that is in their mindset immediately, but you think he's going to at least start, where will it be in the Tingle Creek Cross?
Yeah, he's entering the Schlur, isn't he? But I think Tingle Creek is perhaps where they'll look to go. And I just think if they can find his jumping a little bit more, that's his weapon. And it's Al Fabiolo's perhaps slight Achilles heel that he can miss one. And I think maybe if you rode him and used your jumping to pressurise Al Fabiolo's, that might just be the turning around of it. But it is a fairly big might, I know.
Yeah, so maybe a slightly underwhelming division in that we've been spoilt for choice over the years gone by, the likes of Altior, Sprint Sacra, and we thought maybe one day the likes of Constitution Hill could live in this, or at least they only were going to go chasing if he was going to become a Gold Cup horse. So the 2-mile chase division has probably been whacked a little bit of a sort of what's so good about it after all type of message, especially by Nicky Henderson earlier on in the season, as that's why Constitution Hill isn't going to go this route. So potentially there's a window opening for another horse just to show what they're made of, or at least if they're not going to be Cheltenham bound, they're going to be able to take some of the other 2-mile chase races. Is there something that is lurking that's a little bit left to centre for UTC?
Well, if you take out El Fabiolo and John Bond, the two horses that we've already mentioned in good detail, it is a very weak division. And I found it difficult to come up with another horse who is going to be a bona fide challenger in these Grade 1 races at the big festivals, aside from those two. So I thought I'd cheat again. And by cheat, what I mean is just not go by the brief whatsoever. Because this is obviously the 2-mile chasing division, but my horse is probably a 2.5 miler. I'm just throwing it out there. But I've gone for a mare called Nurse Susan. Look, she probably isn't going to run over 2 miles, but her best form so far has been over that trip, which is why I thought she might just have a little bit of a loophole and go in this category. She's a 6-year-old. She hasn't run since March 2022, so 20 months. She was off the whole of last season. But I know that she's very well regarded by trainer Dan Skelton. She was only beaten twice last year by Love Envoy, who is subsequently a 2-time Grade 1 placed mare, obviously good form. She was also beaten by a horse with no name, fantastic dual-purpose performer who won at Royal Ascot, and Gronji, who is a horse who's been a bit up and down in her career for Willie Mullins, but has a lot of talent. Prior to that, Nurse Susan was also behind Love Envoy, again boosting that form. The fact that Dan Skelton wants to keep her around and hasn't retired her after what I can only imagine was a pretty bad injury to keep her off for the whole season and 20 months in total suggests they still think this mare's got a lot of potential to do well over fences. And look, she's a Scopy type. If you watch some of the replays, you'll see that she's not a hurdler. She is a chaser in the making. And I think she has an entry at Exeter on Monday. What date would that be? That would be the 20th of November. That's over 2 mile, 3 furlongs. So as I say, she probably doesn't fit in this category. But I'm not looking for a Saturday horse here. I'm looking for a horse that would win on a wet and windy Warwick or, an Exeter during the week and rack up a sequence. And Nurse Susan is just that.
Okay, you're a bit like your very own Rishi Sunak, finding loopholes to get politicians into their cabinets.
Don't ever compare me with Rishi Sunak again. What is going on?
It's only because when you said loophole, I thought about how bizarre it is that David Cameron's now appearing in politics, and you're finding your own loopholes to get horses that don't deserve to be in these podcasts in the podcast. But we'll love it. We'll take it as long as they win. That's all that seems to matter. So that's Nurse Susan for the 2-mile chase division, and John Bond for Ross. Now we're going to move quickly into the dark horse to follow, because this was the section that last year really delivered the goods, and I don't know if it will be something that TC and Ross will remember, which ones that they had picked. Maybe it is sort of in top of their head because it lives fondly in their memory. But Ross, you're nodding. Was there one that you were particularly pleased that you included in this section last year?
Yeah, I think Fugitive popped up in this section last year, didn't he? And he did me really well. And I enjoyed following him. I think he's a horse with still more to give as well. He's, by all accounts, heading to the Paddy Power Gold Cup this weekend. Mr. Hinchy, the owner, is doing a rain dance. He's in good form, so I'm excited to see him step on even further this year. And I think he's a horse that will perhaps stay a bit further too.
Yeah, Fugitive went up, 20 odd pounds in the handicap. He was such a legend for his connection. So yeah, Fugitive for us. Now, TC, he's nodding along. He can remember something that had a big win, not during Cheltenham as well. What was yours?
I think it was Il Rodotto, who actually beat Fugitive at Cheltenham in January last year. But nice little link there. That was the only time last season that I didn't actually tip him in our weekly podcast. So whether I can claim him as being the long-term fancy and not actually tipping him when he won, I don't know. But I definitely mentioned him in this category.
Okay, well, I think maybe the share of the spoils goes to Fugitive as a great horse to be in within this dark horse to follow. So for that reason, Ross, what have you got for us this season?
Well, I've got 4 that hit on TC's sort of weekday horses. And I think that's really important to stress. We get very wound up about small fields on weekends. There's loads of really good racing during the week. You can watch Jess nearly every day on racing TV. Try and steal a break and watch it on your phone. There is no excuse. I've got 4 that perhaps fit into that mould. The first is Kerry Lee trained Pimlico Point. He was a little bit disappointing in his final 2 starts last year, but on his first novice hurdle start, he was really impressive, beating Super Survivor and Autonomous Cloud. They're now both rated 130. He's going novice chasing. He's a son of Flemingsworth. The usual blah blah of the size and scope to make a chaser, providing his brain links to his feet adequately. He's off a mark of just 118. He was entered up last week and then was a non-runner because the ground went quick at Hereford. He's in at Exeter on Monday, so that might be a nice day for the podcast SBK WhatsApp group. I think he's going to make up into a much better chaser than hurdler. If he does, he's going to make hay off a mark of 118. Then Alaphilippe, who came within a hair's breadth of giving Fergal O'Brien his first Cheltenham Festival winner in the 2022 Per Temps final, got collared on the line. He missed a year with injury, came back over fences at Carlisle in a really good novice chase behind Good Risk at All, and Giovinco tipped up in that race. He got outpaced at a crucial stage, stayed on really well over 2 mile 4. He's a 3 mile horse out and out, a mark of 137 now. I think they'll find plenty to do with him this season. Ballybreeze for Sam Drinkwater was really impressive, winning at Chepstow. The second horse is rated 120. He beat him hollow. He won in a canter. Third horse is rated 112. He was 20 lengths something back. Then went to the Arkle, which I think was sort of tilting at windmills, quite honestly. They were there for the day out. And then from there went to Market Raise and was cantering all over them as far as I was concerned, and tipped up 3 out. He's off a mark of just 120, and I think he's probably the best handicap chaser in the country. And then one final one for Kim Bailey, a horse that I saw win his point-to-point for the posts, Salt Rock. Really gorgeous, impressive-looking horse. I was really excited to see him in his bumper last year, and he absolutely bombed out big time, finished last at Warwick. I actually spoke to Matt Nichols, who's assistant trainer to Kim Bailey. They said they found a few problems after that. They've ironed them out. He's had a wind up. His work is looking really good, and he should be good to go in a couple of weeks.
TC, take it away. What have you found for us?
Yeah, I've got 2 in this category. Both do actually fit in here. The first is Mr. Megget. He's a son of Shantu who was bought for 62,000 back at the horse and training sales in 2021, but he didn't make his rules debut until just last week, where he was sent off a rather short 11-4 shot for John Joe O'Neill in what looked to be a good novice hurdle as well. Either the bookmakers are finally catching on that John Joe O'Neill, who we will get to in due course, is a trainer to follow, or connections really like this animal. And I think it might be the latter in this case. Mr. Megget travelled strongly from the outset. He moved through the race brilliantly, stretched clear in the closing stages to beat what I think is a pretty good horse back in second, trained by Fergal O'Brien, firmly on the snaff. He wasn't asked for maximum effort by any means, but he got the job done very nicely. And I think John Joe O'Neill could be set for a big year with this horse, Mr. Megget. The other one is definitely a dark horse. That is Lowry's Bar. He won a maiden hurdle at Wincanton for Philip Hobbs and Johnson White. He jumped well throughout in that race as well. He was briefly outpaced between the last 2 by a horse that's trained by Paul Nicholls, who is a very good prospect called Panjari, who I think was a listed winner in Germany prior to coming to the UK. So the fact that he outpaced Lowry's Bar was no real surprise, given he has that proven flat speed. But what was key is that Lowry's Bar actually fought back in the closing stages and got his head in front of the line. And that wasn't because Panjari was slowing either. Lowry's Bar was quickening. I think he's a very nice prospect for middle to longer distances, maybe towards this season, but definitely into next year. So Lowry's Bar, more of a dark horse. Mr. Megget could be a Saturday horse this year.
Okay, love it. I did see Mr. Megget run. I thought that you couldn't not be taken by him. And 2 interesting sorts, Mr. Megget and Lowry's Bar for TC. I've got a couple, again, trying to think really outside the box with the first one. Supremely West for Dr. Richard Newland, who is a trainer who's had probably a smaller string of jumpers than he once did. But they've started this season off in great form, especially several of them being off for a long time. This horse is interesting. He began running in bumpers in March time, so we hadn't seen him for a good period of time over the winter. and he ran quite quickly in succession. His first run of the hurdles, he really didn't jump well at all, and they've obviously done a good bit of schooling with him, and he's now come back and won 2 novice hurdles, stepping up and tripped quite nicely last time out only a few days ago, to win both novice hurdles and one under a penalty. So he's a horse that could just turn into quite a nice handicapper. He's got a rating of 121, and he won't be in the sort of fancy type races, but he just might just go a little bit more unnoticed, and I thought he's definitely improved for a summer off. And the other one is a 3-year-old who'll be a juvenile now, switches from the flat into Jumps company, and this is Golden Move for Paul Nicholls. He's a son of Golden Horn. I saw him at the Horses in Training Sale, where he made huge money. 210,000 for a horse in training is it's an awful lot for me, but that's what National Hunt trainers are paying nowadays for these 3-year-olds, these well-bred and lovely big types. He's 16-2. He came highly recommended by Richard Fahey, his old trainer. He's a horse that was running very well in middle distance races on the flat, and Paul Nicholls does well with these types, the likes of Rubo, and we know that he would put his money where his mouth is, and I think he bought him on spec that day, so he wanted to go to push the budget out to buy a horse of this nature. So he is one that will be in the juvenile hurdle division, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he gets on in what I have to say is quite a tough division nowadays, with the likes of Willie Mullins really dominating with bringing horses over from France. But Golden Move, I was really taken by as an athlete. So those are dark horses to follow. Hopefully we've got something in there that's going to be a lot of fun to follow throughout the course of the season, and I would imagine you probably haven't heard of them on other podcasts yet, so they're slightly a bit left of centre. And now we're going to go on to something that is also just maybe not what you would hear normally, just an area of the National Hunt season that could just be profitable for you, and this is looking at trainers and jockeys to follow for the season. And some have really had great years, the likes of Johnny Burke, and a wonderful year last year. He would have been great to follow, but there could be just some trainers and jockeys this year that might just be brimming into something a little bit special. TC, you mentioned one trainer that you really had a couple of nice horses that you've included in this podcast, so you can tell us a little bit more about why you think he's going to have a season to remember.
Yeah, the trainer in question is John Joe O'Neill, and actually I've done this podcast, or a very similar podcast, for the last 3 years, 2 for SBK and prior to that 1 for Racing Post. And in each of the podcasts we talked about a trainer or a jockey to follow, and every single time I said John Joe O'Neill. So I've got the hat trick up now, and I'll definitely say him next year as well. Now this guy was known for having very good horses ridden by Tony McCoy back in the day. And then he went through like a 5-year patch where all of his animals just seemed to get older and older, and he didn't have any young new prospects coming in. And it just seemed like he was running horses in veterans races or low grade handicaps. And it looked like his career was going on a downward trend. But over the last couple of years, he's got some very nice young stock. Mr. Megget, the horse I just touched on in Dark Horses section, is the prime example of a horse with that kind of profile for John Joe O'Neill that you should follow. And because those horses tackle runners from Nicky Henderson, Paul Nicholls, and then when you get to the festivals, Willie Mullins and Gordon Elliot, they're always overlooked. So look out for these John Joe O'Neill young horses, the 5 and 6 year olds especially over.
Okay, so John Joe O'Neill for TC. Right, what about a selection from you, Ross? We've got you can also have a jockey to follow as well for the season.
So just a trainer to give a mention to is Robbie Llewellyn, who was former assistant trainer to Tim Vaughan, set up on his own. He's going along really well, and what I like about him is he takes horses off other people, improves them and wins with them. I think that's a really good trait to have when you're starting out as a trainer, so certainly follow him. And then 3 jockeys for you. Of the established lot, Gavin Sheehan, I think he's just taken his ride to another level in the last season and a half, operating at a 20% strike rate this season alone. Of course, that harnesses with Jamie Snowden having a better crop of horses, and he gets the pick of them. And then 2 young jockeys, Elizabeth Gale, still claims £10 for Philip Hobson Johnson White. She's been seen to good effect on Celebrity Allen. And then Tapley just this week, she happens to have a knack of getting a horse in the right place, judging her ride nicely, and is plenty strong enough in the finish and is only going to get neater and tidier. And then another young lad who's based with Tom Lacey is Cameron Isles. He started off on the flat actually with Richard Hannon, only had a couple of rides, got a bit tall. he's really impressed me. He's neat and he's tidy and he's very, very good to an obstacle. I spoke to Tom Lacey, who said he's going to improve with time. He's going to mature as an individual, but he's a really smart horseman. Goes on all the tricky ones at home, and they got high hopes for him. And he was really good on Operation Manor at the weekend.
Okay, Cameron Isles and Elizabeth Gale, along with Robbie Llewellyn and Gavin Sheehan. I'll have a shout out for Jamie Snowden as well. I think in general he's got a really exciting bunch of horses, just a better quality of horse than he ever has had. So we'll move on now. We've got Ante-post plays to close this out. And this is another reminder of what was thrown out last year. TC put up Brave Man's Game for the King George. So we give you the opportunity to come up with anything from the Cheltenham Festival, anything, as competitive as the Welsh National or the Grand National. So TC, what have you got? Because you mentioned at the top of the show that you've got something for the Brown Advisory.
Yes, exactly. Generally, I wouldn't have an Ante-post bet for the Cheltenham Festival until just after Christmas when the racing in Leopardstown happens, and then I'll have my customary one or two for the Thames final. But in preparation for this podcast, I hopefully have uncovered a nice one for the Brown Advisory, and that is a horse called Nick Rocket, or Rocket, however you want to pronounce his name. It's currently 20-1 for the Brown Advisory. I think that's a very fair price. Now, this gelding won a 3-mile point at Curramore in October 2021. He beat the likes of Yukon Tango, who's a subsequent 3-time winner, Benassi, who's won twice under rules, both of those now trained by Ollie Murphy. He was also in that race against Arctic Brazil, who made a very impressive hurdling debut for Henry de Bromhead, winning a 22-runner race over in Ireland last year before things went a bit awry when he was up to in class. Arctic Brazil fell in the race, but I don't think he would have beaten Nick Rocket in that point anyway. The key to mentioning the point is that the fact that he stayed on powerfully in the closing stages over 3 miles. Not just the form in behind looks pretty strong, but also the trip definitely suited. And the fact that he'll be going over 3 mile, hopefully this year, we'll see him in much better light. Now, last year, he had 4 runs for Willie Mullins under rules. He won 3 of them, very impressive on each occasion. Very good in the Grade 2 at Ferryhouse in April as well. And I just think he's got all the talent to make his mark at the highest level. Hopefully he can jump very well. I think he will. He's won a point. Why wouldn't he? And 20-1 just seems very fair for the Brown Advisory at this stage.
Yes, as I was going to just echo that, 20-1 for the Brown Advisory. You heard it here first, Nick Rocket, the Ante-post plate for Tom Collins. Okay, Ross, what do you have for us?
So I've got a soon to happen one and a long range one. So the soon to happen is complete unknown for the Ladbroke Trophy. I think this has got the whiff of a real plot job for Paul Nicholls. He loves second season chasers going into the what was the Hennessy. He ran really well on soft and heavy ground last year, and then took it to another level on good to soft ground behind Jerry Colomb at the Aintree Festival. That ground was almost certainly too lively for him. I liked what he did in his return at Newton Abbot, putting away Mai Tai over a fairly inadequate trip. I think this is the plot, and providing the rain keeps coming, I think he's got a great chance off the mark of 152 in the Hennessy Ladbroke Coral Gold Cup. And then one for the Cheltenham Festival. Dino Blue really impressed me at Naas at the weekend. I thought she raced quite keenly over 2 miles, wasn't given much respite by Sarah Gerhard, pressing her all the way. And then Phil Dorr, who'd been ridden really patiently and looked like being ridden very smart to come and pick up the pieces, came to challenge her up the run at Naas, which is stiff enough. And I was surprised that she found as much as she did, and she actually pulled away at the death. I think stepping up in trip on better ground is going to suit her. And I think the Mare's Chase is going to take a good one to beat her in that.
Okay, Dino Blue in the Mare's Chase, along with Complete Unknown for the Hennessy. Right, I am going for a horse that if you are a regular listener to this podcast, you know how heartbroken I was, and the fact I was actually just put off jump racing for a long time after seeing Jerry Colomb get beat at the Cheltenham Festival. But he did get beat, which means that I can use him here for this jumps preview. He is a horse that then went to go and proved himself in Aintree, beating Complete Unknown in the Grade 1, and then he won on his first start back of the season and what was already one of the races of the season so far, the Ladbrokes Champion Chase at Down Royal just last week, and he showed how much he is an out stayer. I'm really hoping he's going to develop into a Gold Cup horse and be the Gold Cup horse that will put Galopin Deschamps in his place. I think he's got the makeup to be a horse to be really excited about and get his revenge back at the Cheltenham Festival after being beaten there last year. He's around about 13-2. I'm happily going to take that because I think he has already proved to be bigger and better this season. So I'm really looking forward to seeing him come the rest of the season, whatever the route it might be. So Jerry Colon to continue on from last year for me. That will be my Ante-post play. Okay, that is it. We have completed in under an hour. Just about done it. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope you've used all the horses in your notes, and you've got them in your trackers. We've got plenty in there. And what I'm really pleased to have heard are horses that I've had to relook up. Some don't even have their new trainers as associated down on the relevant racing websites. So that just goes to show how much we've done our work, our homework, to sort of unpick some new stars for this next season. So the best of luck, enjoy it. Don't forget, as always, all new SBK users get £30 in free bets when they sign up and bet £10 for the first time. And make sure that you subscribe and like, as we will be back every week for our weekly previews. Thank you to Tom and thank you to Ross.